Hey friend, do you ever find yourself in your relationships repeating patterns that make you feel like your own needs are unfulfilled? And, does this lead to a kind of resentment that causes division in your relationships? And would you like to, overcome this pattern? If your answer is yes, this reading is for you. Guiding our reading today, we have the Topsy-Turvets. The Topsy-Turvets help us to learn to look at things from a different point of view, from a different angle. Maybe you're looking at the same thing, but if you learn to look at it from a different way, it really changes the energy, changes the interaction, and you can change the patterns themselves with the energy that you bring forth in order to create a different outcome, right? Go ahead and pick a face, on the card here. You see one particular way of looking at things, and then we turn it over, and the face completely transforms. It's a whole new way of looking at, the face, the individual that you're perceiving. And this is how we can approach the difficulties that you maybe are having in your relationships, or maybe, just something that you want to improve on in the way that you interact with others. So that way it's more of a fair, equal give and take, right? Okay. Starting out, we have the Five of Wands, okay? In this deck, you have these two young fairy boys. They received this gift from a fairy girl. This egg, this mysterious magical egg. They don't know what it is. It could be a phoenix, could be a dragon, could be really anything. Spoilers, it's a dragon. Okay, so they got this egg, right? This blessing, this gift. And, they're thinking, what could it be? They have a little bit of a debate, a little bit of an argument, right? We think of the Five of Wands and the Rider-Waite-Smith. You have the individuals with their wands, and they're kind of in this mock battle, in this fight, right? And then it's not really out of any kind of aggression or, like malevolence, toward each other. It's to help each other grow. It's to help each other build skills. So you received something in your life probably early on that maybe felt like conflict, maybe felt like struggle and difficulty, but it was there to help you build muscles, to help you build skills, knowledge, understanding in yourself. Okay? The purpose of this was to help you come into this Queen of Wands energy, okay? The Queen of Wands, she is the witch of the tarot. She absolutely has the magic. She knows how to take, the energies that come her direction and channel them to create her reality. She doesn't have to step into this masculine energy and be like, this is what I want. This is how things have to be, very specific. She knows, yes, what she wants, but she's flexible enough to be able to work with what's given to her, right? With what, comes her direction. She's confident in herself, and she's confident that the universe is going to help her achieve her goals. And this is what you want to come into, right? This confidence, this manifesting ability from a more feminine type of energy, instead of, this domination, this tendency, to kind of want to control the outcome of how things, work out. Which is interesting because we have the Emperor up next, okay? But when I'm looking at the Emperor here, I'm not really thinking in terms of the masculine energy, maybe a certain amount, but what I'm getting here is more about his shield, right? This protector, this, defender, this guardian. It's not the sword, it's not the masculine principle of, directing the will and cutting and, that focus. It's more of a protective, feminine type of an energy, right? There's this responsibility, yes, that, maybe you have a certain role, a certain leadership, but the Emperor, he's very good at delegating. He understands people. He brings out their strengths. He helps them, work out their weaknesses. You do have a certain perception about people's pluses and minuses, right? And maybe this is why you've had a tendency to come into this masculine energy, because you want to be the helper. You want to see the potential in others come out and be, fulfilled. Unfortunately, at times, this has caused problems because, it brings you into this domineering kind of an energy. All right. We have the Chariot, okay? in your traditional decks, the chariot would be, not necessarily depicted as somebody holding the reins, directing, the horses or the sphinxes or the chariots, depending on your deck, the griffins in this one. But the charioteer in this deck, she is holding the reins, and these two griffins do look uncomfortable, right? And she's standing tall and confident, and you've had this confidence in yourself, but maybe this excessive confidence, not excessive confidence, that's not really the best way of describing it, but this, domineering kind of energy has made other people uncomfortable, right? You just wanted things to go a certain way, so you had this natural tendency to take control. I absolutely understand that. This has been an issue of mine for a while, and, this is coming from my own growth and my own learning to be able to say, hey, look, this is a better way to handle this. And the better way to handle that, right, now is to kind of, like I said, change the way you look at it, right? You have this hanged fae, this hanged man energy, right? You want to kind of perceive things from a different angle. What is this different angle? If you have this leadership quality, this tendency to want to see the best in others, what is the different angle on that? Well, the different angle is an angle of stewardship, right? This Two of Swords. The fairies in this deck, they have this garden that has been entrusted to them, this beautiful rose garden. They, are here to care for it, water it every day, tend to the roses. They find this blue rose, this something special, right? The trick here is to learn how to take care of that something special without trying to control the outcome. And this is the lesson you're starting to learn. You're seeing the patterns of like, oh man, I'm really trying to control the way other people act, or I'm trying to direct an outcome to be a certain way. And this actually, if you know the story in this deck, turns out to be a bit of a problem, because these two fairy girls, they actually end up not being able to take care of this blue rose properly because, they don't have the knowledge or skills and have to ask for help. So the point here is to switch from this energy of dominance and control into more of a stewarding type of an energy, right? You care for the life that, you tend to. You care for those that you are responsible to, not trying to micromanage or control or direct things, but rather be there to help, to remove the bugs, to water, to, provide nourishment, and gently and kindly. And this is what's actually going to be more helpful for you, right? And this is, what comes back to this Four of Wands. This is the fairy girl giving them the eggs. You have this thought process, this remembering of like what it was in your life that taught you this behavior, that taught you this pattern of wanting to take charge, of wanting to be in the overly masculine energy without having that proper balance, right? You give some thought to it. You really, come to an understanding with this Ten of Swords energy, right? You can't get worse. You've hit rock bottom, right? It's not an 11 of Swords after it. This is the end where you realize, like, you see the pattern, and there is hope in this, right? Because now we have this new rosebud, this new blue rose. You've recognized that, like, okay, well, if I have this tendency to act this way, now I can choose a different way of behaving, right? I can put this pattern, this behavior to rest. And that's where we come into the Strength card, okay? Strength in this deck, the dragon is very much the same energy that you would see in the lion within your traditional decks, except that, a dragon, say, if we were living in a world with dragons, would probably be considerably more fierce than a lion, I would imagine, right? So this very intense, powerful energy that you've discovered that you have within yourself, what you've figured out is that instead of trying to use force and control, that if you're relaxed and you're receptive and you just allow this presence, this power, this force to just exist peacefully, that you naturally grow into this, right? Like the energy channels through you, in the same sense of like if you eat healthy foods, you grow healthy because that's what you become. You allow the energy, this gift, this blessing, to help you grow as an individual and come into a sense of gentleness, an ironic sense of gentleness, at least in appearance, compared to the power and control and dominance that you had tried to, have as your mode of operation earlier on. Okay? And the thing is, like, say, you find somebody that you're attracted to. You get into this Six of Pentacles energy. You want to be the rescuer. I'm looking at this little mouse here. And the little mouse is giving the fairy girl this pentacle. I'm seeing this, he's like offering her a cookie, like the sweetness, the kindness. This is fine, this is beautiful. You showed somebody that you like, that you care about, this kindness and this sweetness, right? We have this romantic energy, right? You start to build a relationship, you start to build a bond, a connection. You're really feeling that love. And then this is where you start repeating that old behavior, that old pattern. The King of Wands, right? He's thoughtful. How can I help this person? What can I do for them? I really like this person and I don't want to lose this opportunity. So what can I do to make myself feel needed? To make them see me as somebody valuable to keep in their life. So then you start solving problems for them and you start doing things for them. And you're coming from this masculine energy, and this is fine to a point. But, you start really planning things out. You have this Three of Wands. The boys are looking at this map book, where we're going to go on an adventure, where, does this lead? What's the territory? And you start planning. You start, mapping out like, well, if I do this, then this is going to happen. If I do that, then that's going to happen. And when we start getting into this overly deep planning, we get into this Ten of Wands, this burden energy of like, okay, now I have to be the one to take action to maintain this relationship. Now I have to be the one that is carrying the weight of this, and right, this energy, this, dominance. And other people start to expect this from you because you show up in this savior energy all the time, and people start to just kind of see that as who you are. And the reality is, you didn't actually want to be in the savior energy. You just thought this is what it was going to take to make somebody else like you. And that leads into the Nine of Swords, right? Like when the breakup happens, when you have this realization that like this didn't help. The bird flies away with the rose. The beautiful thing that you were seeking leaves or is taken off in some other direction because in your attempt to overly, nurture the garden, in your attempt to overly, give all this life and energy, like it becomes overgrown and you get stuck, and the universe has to get you unstuck. It has to get you out of a negative situation, and so the relationship ends up ending. And, you then start, you're brooding a little bit, right? The King of Swords. When I'm thinking of the King of Swords and, like, say, the Queen of Swords in the tarot, I'm actually, you can kind of think of them as, like, the single queen and the single king, right? Like, the king goes off to war, and he has to kind of, like, step out of this romantic energy because he's at war. And the queen, she doesn't have the king there to be the masculine individual within the kingdom, so she steps up to this masculine type of an energy, right? And you get into this very intense, focused, masculine energy, and you start to recognize, well, something's wrong here. The Nine of Wands. You know that you need a solution. You know that you have a tendency to want to control, and you're like, how do I step out of this? How do I stop myself from being overly domineering, from being overly assertive, from just being too much and smothering? And the key here is actually to step into this Queen of Pentacles energy. Now, when I'm talking about, these cards, I'm not necessarily saying you're a man or a woman. We're talking about, your tendency to be receptive, active, all right? The Queen of Pentacles, she knows how to nurture and care for those that she loves. Yes, she's got a good sense. She's got a good head on her shoulders. She knows how to take practical action. But the Queen of Pentacles is a receptive type of an energy, right? Instead of, maybe trying to solve people's problems, if somebody's having difficulty, think about holding space for them, right? Think about being that listening ear that allows them to express what they're feeling, what they're venting, without necessarily having to step in to provide a solution. Now, if somebody does ask for your help, that's okay. But that's them coming to you and saying, hey, can you help me with this thing? And then if you're in this receptive energy and you have this space that you're holding for another person, then you can provide from what you have instead of pushing and overextending yourself, right? And then this doesn't become this resentment, right? The resentment, the Four of Cups. You have these two individuals here, they had this really sweet relationship, the elf boy and the water nymph here, and she told her friends about the elf boy, and they kind of poked fun at her and gave her a hard time, and that ended up causing this division between them. You don't have to have this division between you if you're not coming from a place of expecting to be the fixer and then other people expecting you to be the fixer. Now, if you are coming from this as a point of holding space for somebody, then that kind of creates a feeling of safety. It's a lot easier. There's not this expectation, this pressure on you, and if you don't have that resentment, you don't come into this Tower energy. But if you do have that resentment, that's where the division comes in. But this isn't, an end of all hope, because here's the thing about that. The lightning bolt might be striking the tower, tearing down this structure, this unsustainable relationship dynamic. But if you allow yourself to receive the inspiration of this lightning bolt, this understanding of what just happened, what caused this type of pattern, then you can choose to open up your heart, right? Love, in its truest kind of core sense, is about being able to hold space, right? It's to be able to look at somebody with both their difficulties and with their beautiful, wonderful parts of themselves, and see them as they are without necessarily being like, I have to fix you. Just see somebody as they are, and I accept you. You're wonderful, you're beautiful, and I'm just here for you, okay? That heart space, that Ace of Cups, that opening, okay? So this is the message, friend. Don't try to fix. Hold space. Allow yourself to be that safe space, that comfort zone, and then it doesn't come from you giving and giving and giving until you feel exhausted, or until you feel that you are more providing in the relationship than the other person is. You can have this healthier dynamic, this healthier way of doing things, okay? I hope this is helpful for you. I hope this is providing you some sort of insight into how you can view your way of wanting to help others, your way of wanting to be that, hero, that knight in shining armor, and, take off the armor and just be that safe space. Alright friends, if this reading's helpful for you, go ahead and leave a like for me, comment on the video. Don't know to comment? You can leave a sunflower for me, or, some small comment like for the algorithm. Your comment tells the algorithm that you want to see my content. If you leave a sunflower, that tells me you want to see me. That's a spirit guide of mine, and I'll see that and know that you recognize me. If you're not subscribed to my channel already, go ahead and subscribe. Head in, find a video that resonates with you. If you don't find a video that resonates with you, you can head into my community section. I've got a tagged post where you can ask me a question and I'll make a reading for you. Alright friend, I'll see you next time.